Okay, one of the other things that virtualization gives us is a great deal of flexibility in terms of network support. Um, a VM can have as many as 4 simulated network adapters. If you're talking about an ESXi host, we're talking about VM kernel adapters. Um, you can actually add multiple NICs, and they don't all have to be on the same network. Say, for example, you could have, say, if you're simulating an ESXi host tied into a storage area network, and also into the network that that ESXi host is going to provide some kind of application services to. Um, one of those VMs could be in a private network for the SAN, which might also be virtualized, and then one of the other networks would be in one of the other NICs would be in a network that it's talking to. Now, so in a sense, you could, with multiple virtual adapters in multiple subnets, you almost have a situation where these things are working a little bit like routers. Really and truly, they're not doing that. The only thing they care about is routing their own data. And as things move up and down the protocol stack, they might come in one adapter, go up to the application layer, realize they need something out, reach out also through the application layer down to the network and data link layers and go out to a different NIC for the sake of reaching a different VM. These network adapters can be configured in many ways: local, bridged, shared, using NAT. Um, your hypervisor can provide DHCP and almost be the router for all of your VMs. Now, if you have a virtual machine in local mode or in what VMware calls host-only mode, it is the emulated the virtual NIC is plugged into a virtual switch, and it could literally only talk to the host machine. So it can talk to the host machine, and it kind of reaches through the host machine, through the hypervisor to the physical network, but it couldn't talk to any other VMs running in that same hypervisor. Um, one of the other options is bridged mode, which we do not think is a good idea in test environments, because what you essentially are doing is giving your VM access to your the IP address of the host device. Not really a good plan. Um, you can also do what we call shared net mode. That allows you to reach outside networks, but also isolates the VM. It can it can't send and receive through the physical network. It still has to talk to the hypervisor, and the hypervisor can decide whether it gets out or not. So let's look at what that looks like. Um, so we got a VM, a virtual bridge switch, and it goes out to the so the virtual NIC is basically bridged all the way over to the physical NIC, not even really talking to the host OS. So if you've got a virtual local switch, you've got your virtual NIC, virtual switch talking to the host machine, and the host machine can decide whether it gets out. One of your other options is virtual shared NAT. So your hypervisor is providing DHCP through the clients on this virtual switch to this virtual NIC. So you can have multiple VMs running in the same way, running and using the network in different ways, or not at all. One thing you can do with VMware Workstation is to create what we call LAN segments. And VMnets. Some of those VMnets can be bridged or host only or NAT. A LAN segment essentially will be more or less you create a label, which in the back end corresponds to a virtual LAN. So you got a virtual LAN on your virtual switch, VVLAN, something, if you want to, if you will. And what you can do essentially is put all of the hosts of a certain that need to be working together but not talking to anything else. Say, for example, you've implemented an Active Directory domain with DHCP and DNS and the whole 9 yards. Or you've built up a little test lab of Linux boxes, and you want them all talking to each other, but not to anything else. You can put them in LAN segments. We also have migration tools. These migration tools allow us to move our VMs from one place to another. Sort of what we talked about in the previous video about converting VMs from one format to another. You can use them to import VMs from one source to another. Say you built a VM in, say, Hyper-V, and you need to move it to VMware Workstation, or vice versa. Or you want to turn a VMware Workstation into a VirtualBox workstation, or Xen into something else. The VMware Converter will allow us to do some of that. There's also a product that will do this. The Hyper-V Converter, turning a Hyper-V box, a VMware box, VMware application or workstation into a Hyper-V application. The problem there is that it expects as its target a running Hyper-V server, which you kind of can't have without, say, an Active Directory. So if you're used to running Hyper-V and you want to convert VMware VMs to Hyper-V, you're going to have to do a lot of work. It might just be easier if you're in a class that needs a lot of VMs and the instructor is suggesting VMware, to just use VMware. You can probably get away with shimming VMware and VirtualBox together, but VMware and Hyper-V doesn't seem to work all that well without a lot of infrastructure. Let me see. Let's actually talk about some. Actually, I'm going to in the next segment, I'm going to talk about various options for virtual machines. So I'll be right back.